Welcome to the Grazing Grass Podcast, episode 200. Today on the Grazing Grass Podcast, we talk with Adam Daugherty, a fifth-generation farmer from southern Indiana, whose grazing journey started with a couple of cows on his grandfather's farm and has steadily grown into a thoughtful, highly managed operation. Adam shares how small opportunities, like leasing a few acres, partnering with family, or listening to a persistent brother-in-law, open the door to more regenerative practices, while balancing a full-time job. His story is a great reminder that you don't have to start big to make meaningful progress, and you can do it while working a full-time W-2 job. You're listening to the Grazing Grass Podcast, where we help grass farmers learn from grass farmers. I'm your host, Cal Hardage. Hey ranchers, ready to start 2026 with a sharper focus on profitability? Noble Research Institute is kicking off the new year with two powerful courses. First, the business of grazing, January 21st through 23rd in Bossier City, Louisiana. You'll calculate gross margins, analyze real-world water and fencing investments, and build grazing plans that turn business goals into daily action. Then Noble Profitability Essentials, February 4th and 5th in Ardmore, Oklahoma. You'll plan for positive net farm income, create full budgets, and use ratios to benchmark your ranch and remove what's dragging down your bottom line. Noble pairs in-field research with ranch management expertise, giving you practical, real-world solutions. Visit noble.org today and start your year strong. For 10 seconds about the podcast, once again, I'm changing the Grazing Grass website. So if you find yourself scrolling social media, jump over to grazinggrass.com and check out the website. It's still in early days on this version, but we're getting there. Also, you'll find there's some free content and then there's some paid content or content for our Grazing Grass insiders. I've tried to find the balance because I want to give everything away, but at the same time, we have to fund the grazing grass and keep things going. So there is some paid portions. I think we found a pretty good balance. But if you'd like to provide some feedback, shoot me an email. Like I said, it is early days, so there's more things coming to it, and I'm working on it almost every day right now. But enough of that. Let's listen to our coming events and then talk to Adam. So Adam, we want to welcome you to the Grazing Grass Podcast. And to get started today, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your operation?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Cal. I'm Adam Daugherty, fifth generation farmer. I've always been around cattle. I started in 2011 helping my grandpa. So I guess that was when I initially got into cattle myself, bought a couple cows and he had some extra pasture space to lease me, I guess. And so we exchanged muscle help for pasture and feeds in the winter. My dad had cattle, but he didn't have any space for me. So that was how it started. And then in 2017, I partnered with my aunt. She lost her husband, actually great aunt, and she wanted to retain ownership of her herd. And so, but needed help. So we worked out a deal to where she retained full ownership of everything. And then at the end of the year, we split the calf check because I done all the labor. So, so that was kind of a good thing, good way to get my foot in the door in the cattle world. I guess jumping forward, 2019, I guess is when you officially call me a grazer. That was when we started rotational grazing. My brother-in-law had been after me for a couple years at least to try the rotational grazing stuff. And my biggest thing working a full-time job was kind of the big thing that I don't have time. I don't have time. So I kept bucking it. And of course, my wife also works full-time job, so we're busy. And anyway, he finally convinced me. He said, "Why don't you just put up some like high tensile and cheap posts and just give it a try? Don't go whole hog. Just give it a try, and set up some semi-permanent fences, and that way you can move quick and easy and just give it a shot." So we did in 2019, and obviously fell in love with it, and it worked way better than we expected. Obviously some work getting started,
Right.
putting in the infrastructure, but never really looked back from 2019. In 2020, my brother-in-law was leasing the adjacent farm next to us, and he had a job change and needed to scale back just a little bit, but hated to give up the pasture. So we took it on and leased it with him, and that was when we kind of got into geared reels and polywire and started messing with that a little bit. So that's because that farm wasn't completely mapped out with semi-permanent fences at that point. And so that was kind of our introduction to polywire and what you'd call the traditional rotational grazing. And so we done that for a while, and then over time ended up subdividing it with fiberglass and high tensile fencing. And then this year, January of 25, my brother-in-law and I decided she was ready to sell out, and she was getting of the age she wanted to retire completely. And so we bought her out, and we got a grant through the Lost River Soil and Water, which is in our area here. And we put in we went whole hog on that property too, because obviously we've been grazing this long, and we subdivided that entire farm, and then went through and also added a bunch of water infrastructure on that one. So that's kind of a quick whatever of what I've done and where I'm at the moment.
Yeah, great journey there. Some wonderful opportunities, being able to put some cattle with your grandpa, and then getting the opportunity with your aunt, your great aunt, and then your brother-in-law. When you were growing up, it sounds like your dad had cattle, your grandpa had cattle. Was it more the conventional operation we think about, set stock and managing the cows that way?
Yeah, my dad's always had the beef cattle, but yeah, he done just the continuous grazing, still does at this point. Yes, and my grandpa actually, they dairied from 56 up until about 2001. So I was really young. I do remember the dairy days, but that farm is actually, the dairy farm is what I'm on today.
Yes.
So that's where I'm at. But yeah, and then after the dairy cattle left in 01, from 01 to 2011 is when my grandpa kind of farmed on his own, and he just had basically free range cattle out there, and they had the entire farm to themselves. So
you mentioned your brother-in-law is the one who was the catalyst for you to starting to rotate your cattle. Was he doing that? Had he been exposed to it a long time, or had he just started?
No, he'd been doing it for about 4 or 5 years prior to us starting. He grew up on a small cattle operation, and he kind of got into it a little earlier, obviously, and he'd messed with the polywire, and I can't say I ever really was against it, watching him do it, but at the same time, just the time factor. I didn't think I could ever make the time factor work. So that was kind of what, he had been doing it for a while, and kind of was a big spur to getting me to do it.
When I talk to people, that time factor is the biggest issue. And I know you talk to grazing experts, it's not very long, 30 minutes, you go out there, you've got a new paddock up and you're done.
Yeah.
But I also know from working off the farm and doing it, there's days you come home, you don't want to go do that.
Yeah.
So I get that hesitation, and then you're like, I don't have to be out there quite so long. I think in the long run, it improves your grass. It doesn't take too much time. And maybe in some cases, especially during winter, when I've got a little stockpile, I find I spend less time than someone who's out feeding a lot of hay or something.
Yeah.
But that job makes a big difference in that.
It does.
So when you started thinking about it and you're like, this time issues could be an issue, could be taking too much time. You didn't go out and get reels and polywire start. You went out and actually subdivided some pastures with fiber and high tensile to start.
Yes. Yep. Say I went to, so I, obviously being a little unsure of it, didn't want to put in a ton of money, up front, because if it didn't work, then, I wanted to kind of be able to recoup, to get out if I did, because I wasn't wholly sold on it at that point. And so no, we went down to Graber Farm Supply down in Odin, Indiana, and they deal a lot in fiberglass, oil well sucker rod. So it's old sucker rod out of oil wells and such. And they can either cut it or you can buy it whole lengths. It comes in 30-foot lengths. And so we just went down there, bought a trailer load of 30-foot lengths, brought it back, cut it up ourselves, drilled the holes, and then we just went out and just drove those in the ground. We started with 1 inch, then later on we switched over to 1.25 inches and just bore a 1/4 inch hole in it. You can either wire them to that if you think you want to take it down, or what we done was just drove the post as straight as we could and literally just fed the high tensile wire through those holes. And it sold it up to like less than $2 a post. And obviously high tensile wire doesn't cost much. So we started out with 2 strands. Some of our later fences, we switched over to 3 strand, but nonetheless, it was very inexpensive. I think we set wooden posts, went and cut cedar trees and made some brace posts on the ends of the lines. But yeah, just a very inexpensive subdivide fence. I don't know if I'd do that on the perimeter per se, but for subdividing like that, I say we've been very pleased with it. Our intent actually was to take those out, and if it worked, take them out and go to like barbed wire, because that was just what I thought we needed. And it has worked so well that we've stuck with the fiberglass and high tensile.
Now, with your fiberglass posts, you were able to get those sucker rods and chop them down to size, and you started with 1 inch, and you over time decide you need a little bit bigger diameter. Mm-hmm. Why did you make that change?
Mostly availability, because it's all secondhand materials out of there. I say we was able to get the 1.25 inches for about the same money as we started out getting the inch. So it's like, why not have a little beefier post?
Oh yeah. I have not used any of the oil filled sucker rod that I know some people talk about using. I have used some fiberglass posts, and I've got some 3/4 inch fiberglass posts that are just as solid and as stout. So I hear about people using 1 inch or 1.25 inches. And to me, I don't need anything more than that 3/4. Of course, I'm buying it at a store, so that 3/4 is cheaper than 1 inch, 1.25 inches.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So when you decided, you're like, okay, was your brother-in-law, did he help you? Was he pretty happy you were going to try it?
Oh yeah. Oh, James, and he's still, big factor in the whole operation, but no, he's very much, was encouraging. He jumped in. I mean, I kid you not, we was literally like put up 2 fences that spring, and the cows moved. And like after work, we was like putting up another cross fence as the cows was ready to move to the next. Like we was building fence 1 step ahead of the cows. And then, like semi-permanent fencing, you're not just throwing up polywire. So I would not recommend people do that. How it works for us.
Yeah. Sometimes we have to do things we wouldn't recommend for it to work at that point.
Right.
And that leads me to my next question. Did you decide to go out there in that pasture and just put a fence down the middle of it? Or did you go out there and say, I'm going to make a dozen paddocks? I know you were dipping your toe into it. So what was your thought pattern on how many paddocks and how I'm going to do this?
Well, that's where and I've heard you mention this on a lot of other podcasts, but I say I tapped into NRCS. Even though this was not a program, I say Lee Schnell is our guy down there, and he's a friend of mine and been very helpful, even in tech support. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize is not just cost share, but you can go to them and they have the computer software to literally map out acres, and like they can take your farm satellite view and they can map it out for you. And even though you don't necessarily work with them as far as cost share, they can do all this mapping and location and tell you footage. And we even went to ask them about, because we have elevation change. Our some of our
Oh.
pastures are a lot higher than our well, and it obviously takes a certain amount of well pressure, water pressure, to get that water up the hill. And they use LiDAR mapping, which is kind of like radar, but it's elevation. And they was able to tell us how many pounds of pressure it would take to get the water up the hill. So they can tell you a lot of this stuff. And so that's where I turned to NRCS and our local soil and water. And they've done a lot of the tech as far as behind it and telling us where would be best suited for everything. And then obviously we went out there and made moderate changes when we was building. So.
Right. Any advice you get from anybody, you've got to make some adjustments based upon your contacts and what you're doing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
With water, how'd water work for you? You mentioned you had a well, so were you putting in pipe at the same time?
So what we done, once again, we done a temporary, just trying to get started.
Mm-hmm.
We put in just I bought black roll pipe and laid it out on top of the ground, actually like wired it or zip tied it to the side of the post where it's just running underneath. We just fastened the line to the side of the post and just run it right up our temporary fencing. And because our property is laid out in more of a rectangle, we was able to do what we call a water hub where 4 of them come together.
Oh, yeah.
And so we was able to just kind of, one drinking tank at that time, and then like 4 of them come together, and then they had to go get a little creative on the farthest most one. But yeah, we just laid the line on top of the ground, and that's what we've done for probably 3 or 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
So,
and did that work fairly well for you?
It did. And once again, it's one of those kind of surprised me that it worked as well as it did. However, I was going to say, obviously wanted to improve, do better. And when we started leasing the other farm next to us, it had already been lines buried with plastin valves, or what I call pop-ups.
Oh, yeah.
And so we wanted to do that eventually on our farm. And so we ended up getting it. Well, once again, we actually got a cost share grant through the soil and water. And we put in over a half-mile of pipeline from our well all the way up the hill with those plastin valves periodically up through there. And that's how we do it now. So,
and on those, do you have like a plastin valve per every paddock, or are you running some hose on the ground when you're out there?
Well, the way we have set up now is I have a tank on a skid that we move with our UTV. We have a John Deere Gator, and we have a tank on a 170-gallon galvanized tank on a skid. And I have a quick connect plastin valve on the end of it with about 3 foot of hose. And I can pull that tank right over top of each riser, and that it goes up into a Joe full port valve, so the flow is really quick, so it can fill a tank. When the cows start drinking, it kicks that on really quickly and starts recharging the tank quickly. And so whenever I go to move, it's just as simple as disconnect the plastin valve from the ground, hook onto it with a gator, and move to the next pop-up.
Oh, yeah, that sounds like that works so great. And just improve your grazing, be able to move that water point around. And that brings me to my next question. Being able to do that, have you noticed a difference in the grazing pressure or the usage of your pasture with that water where you're bringing it to each one rather than them sharing one for like 4 paddocks? Or has it been about the same?
That's being able to move, as I say, we can minimize the amount of wear and tear, I guess, in my mind, that wear and tear on certain areas, and that's definitely helped us mitigate the animal traffic in certain areas.
Yeah, I that's my expected result. So you all got those first paddocks put in. What kind of effect did you notice on your animals and on your grass by doing that?
I don't know that I noticed a huge effect, at least not immediately on the animals, but definitely on the grass. Yes. As I say, being able to move the water tank from place to place. As I say, we didn't have the little what I call the dairy trails, where the cows, I mean, you have a few here and there, but you minimize that. You don't have the big mud areas around. Obviously, you're going to have some of that certain times of the year. They're going to congregate around the water, and especially with a 65 plus cow herd, then it's going to get a little muddy around each tank. But the ground heals a lot faster from it.
That initial exposure, I know you did a lot of infrastructure, even though you were trying to keep it not too much. You did put it, or you ran pipe on top of the ground. You put in those semi-permanent paddocks. Once you did that and you started grazing your cows, would you ever go back to just that stock?
No, I've had people ask me that before. So, would you ever go back? And no, I don't think I would. Maybe for temporary, if we leased a new farm or something, and had to for a short time. But long-term plan, no. I would say just our pastures are healthier. It's actually one thing a lot of neighbors have noticed is weed control. When you rotation graze and you don't overgraze, then the weed pressure is not there. Or much more minimal anyway. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits. Once again, it took a couple of years to kind of get there, but I'd say we have a longer grazing season. Could be from other factors as well, such as the unrolling hay in the summer and stuff like that. But even just the better pastures, stronger pastures, no, I would never go back.
And you mentioned you were able to, I think it's with some land you got with your brother-in-law, and I may be wrong on that, but you brought in some reels and polywire. How did that go?
It went well. And that was on the adjacent farm next to us here. And we didn't have any problems with it other than just the time factor. And polywire gear reels, I mean, they are very slick, I say. And I mean, if you're going to do polywire, that's about as fast as you can operate. But it does, as it takes a little time to, set up a paddock, take down a paddock, that kind of thing. Especially, we're in Southern Indiana, we're rolling. We've got some uneven ground, creek bed across in places, stuff like that. So, it can definitely have its challenges. You can't always let it just stay up, the deer knock it down and stuff like that. So our biggest thing for getting away from the polywire was just time,
Oh, yeah. So what's your schedule look like? You're working off the farm. Are you coming home and moving cows every night? Is that as simple as opening a gate? Or are you doing a little bit longer?
Well, that's where I don't set anything on a timeline. I do everything. My I guess terminology is listen to the grass. If there's still pasture there, if it's still not overgrazed, let them stay another day. If they turn them in there and in a day and a half, or 2 days, they've grazed it down, then it's time to move on. So I do it more based on just our grass height and what the rest of the pasture looks like. Springtime, obviously, we move probably every 2 days. You get into summertime, we may not move, but once every 5 days. All depends on the grass, depends on, the amount of moisture we're getting and that kind of thing. All our paddocks now are give or take 10 acres. We can subdivide more than that, but for us with that size of herd and the grass that we have, I was going to say 10 acres roundabout is a pretty good number for us. And so that's kind of, what we've went with. So that's, and it's just as simple as opening the gate. Cows know. Biggest thing is in the spring with the baby calves. They got to learn the rotation a little bit, but no, we just come home after work, and when we have the need to move, then we move, and if they're not, then we just do our daily check, and that's that.
Yeah, and that's excellent. That's it doesn't take too long. You open gate, move your cows pretty quickly. I like to think I'm not lazy and I'm more efficient. On my dad's place, we've got permanent paddocks. So when I move them, I'm doing the same thing. I don't know how long they'll stay in there for sure. It's just kind of based upon the grass and what I'm trying to accomplish at that point, and then I go open the gate. I'll be honest. Sometimes the cows, if we've had them up in a working facility or something, they don't want to go that direction. So if they don't want to, I don't fight them. I open the gate and I leave them, and they'll move on their own later, and then I go back and close the gate. So it's not laziness.
Oh yeah.
It's efficient.
That's our big thing. That's efficiency is kind of key for us. With everything we've got going on, that's, I always say that I look at the big guys, not because I want to be a big guy, but because big guys are usually efficient. If you're managing a big herd or you're managing a big operation, then you've got to do things efficiently in order to make money. And so that's kind of, I always like to look. I mean, I take ideas from little guys too, but if you can model some of your mentality against some of the bigger guys, then that kind of, it aligns you with the efficiency part of it.
Right. Yeah, that's an excellent point there. You mentioned unrolling hay. You mentioned about extending your grazing season. Talk a little bit about your winter feeding strategy, grazing strategy.
So once again, that's one of those, it all depends on the year. It all depends on, the season and what we got going, the weather mostly. So being an old dairy farm, we do have a concrete feeding pad, which is not, as probably you would call it, Cal, an unfair advantage to me, because I have that at my disposal. So
I keep thinking, Adam, I need to spend a little bit of time. I say that so often. I need to come up with a better term.
Well, I mean, you're not wrong, though. It is a little bit of an unfair advantage to have that. So we do utilize that. When we're in Southern Indiana, we have very clay soils. When it's not frozen, which is, can be for literally a couple months at a time, it gets very muddy. And if you have no access to concrete or something like that, then sure, unroll hay, let them waste some, your money ahead. But for us, I just can't stand the hay waste whenever I have access to concrete. So I guess, so what we do is, in the dead of winter, we'll bring into our sacrifice area, which is up by the barn. We'll feed in hay feeders on that concrete pad when it's muddy. When it freezes, and it may only be for a few days or a week at a time, whatever, but if it freezes, we'll move the herd out on the pasture. It's, obviously easy to move. We'll unroll hay out on any part of the field we want to out on pasture. And that allows us to obviously put manure out there. And I mean, most grazers know all the benefits of unrolling hay, so I won't get into that. But we have a daily manufacturing unroller on the back of the tractor. It's 3-point hitch. Them guys are based out of Frankfort, Kentucky, and we was able to actually custom order ours a little bit. We done a couple different longer cylinders, and those guys build a very heavy unroller, very well built, and so I'm very pleased with it. So that allows us we have a loader, so we carry one bale on the front and then carry a bale on the back, and we can unroll in some pretty rough terrain with that thing. So that's a big plus for us. I guess to back up as far as getting to the winter, if we get a dry snap, so usually like the last 2 or 3 years, the end of August into September, we've had a dry spell, and we will actually, in the rotation, we'll stop in a field, and when the grass is dry and crispy and, not going to come back, we will take that unroller and we'll unroll hay for however long we need to while the ground is dry, because the ground's dry, it holds the cows, holds the equipment up. The tractor doesn't sink in the mud. There is no mud, so the cows don't waste the hay. And so we'll just bale graze for a little bit in the dry season. As soon as the rain starts back up, then that fall flush, it'll come on and grow, and then we can graze. Like right now, we got one more paddock, and this, we're almost to middle of December here, so that pushes our grazing season into the winter a lot longer. And when it's softer, muddier, then obviously grazing grass is better than feeding hay. So,
right, 2 excellent points there that really help your grazing, Adam. First, during winter, when the ground's frozen, you've got the cows out. You're unrolling hay. But then you're using one of those advantages you have when it's going to be mud, and those cows are going to really pug a paddock up. You've got concrete up by your barn that you're able to feed the animals on to to mitigate that. And as you mentioned, your sacrifice paddock. And I used to hear a lot more use of the word sacrifice paddock, and people's kind of moved away from it, but I really still continue. We typically use one. I've got one that I consider my sacrifice paddock. It's close to my hay barn. It has a barn in it the cows are able to go into. What it doesn't have is, well, I was going to say it doesn't have any concrete. It does. It has a small slab of concrete, and I have a permanent hay feeder on it. So when the conditions are such, I feed them there, and that's my sacrifice paddock. And I know a lot of people don't use that anymore, but I still find it very beneficial.
Well,
And then,
where I think that grazed in the, if you can stay out all year round, if your weather conditions allow, then that's great. But I feel like that's, like kind of the stereotypical grazer thing. If you need an area to kind of more or less just trash it because you have to have somewhere to hold your cattle, that's okay,
right.
because you're still saving the rest of your property. You're still saving, and you can always go in and either reseed that or do a summer annual in that area or whatever. Like, even though it looks rough in the wintertime, you're still you're preserving the rest of your farm, and that's okay to have a sacrifice area, to be able to mitigate the rest of it.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with you with that. Um, if your grass is such and your land is such and the conditions, your context works for being out there all the time, great. But sometimes, especially during muddy areas, that mud season, sacrifice paddock works really nice.
Yeah.
The other thing that you do that I really thought that I'm like, that's a really good idea, that when you are dry and you can't move your cows as fast because grass isn't growing, you go out there and unroll some hay out there.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to slow down their rotation, build you some time for your grass to grow.
Yeah. I was talking to another guy this fall, and he doesn't do the stop and bale graze like we do. And he's like, oh, well, my pastures, I got, this pass, and, by Thanksgiving or even before, I'm going to be done. And grass isn't going to grow no more. And I didn't say anything, just kind of went on with it. And we, the field that we had bale grazed, we moved on. And 10 days later, the grass was probably, about 3 or 4 inches tall after that. And then keep in mind, this was where we was bale grazing during a dry season, but we got we got that rain. The cows had been on it. We pulled the cows off, obviously moved them on when it started raining, and that rain set in. And then, like I said, in 10, 14 days, that grass had already started up. And this is in the fall. And I didn't say a word. I just kind of smiled to myself and thought, well, maybe yours is not, but mine is.
Right. Yes. Yeah. At Redmond, we know that you thrive when your animals do. That's why it's essential to fill the gaps in your herd's nutrition with the minerals that they need. Made by nature, our ancient mineral salt and conditioner clay are the catalyst in optimizing the nutrients your animals get from their forage. Unaltered and unrefined, our minerals have the natural balance and proportion that your animals prefer. This gives your herd the ability to naturally regulate their mineral consumption as they graze. Our minerals won't just help you improve the health of your animals, but will also help you naturally build soil fertility so you can grow more nutrient-dense pasture year after year. Nourish your animals, your soil, and your life with Redmond. Learn more at redmondagriculture.com. Before we move into your cattle a little bit, because I've got to talk about cattle a little bit, what would you tell someone who's thinking about doing some rotational grazing or trying some things that moving away from continuous grazing? What would you tell them to encourage them to start?
I would say it's not as intimidating as a lot of people say. And whether you go the polywire route or like me, where you done the like semi-permanent, fencing with the fiberglass and high-tensile wire, there's a lot of different ways you can get into it relatively inexpensive. I mean, and even like, the black roll on top of the ground, obviously, can't leave that in the wintertime because it'll freeze and bust. but all summer pasture, that was a really inexpensive way to get started and figure out what works and what doesn't work. And you can always make changes later. So I was going to say, just explore your options as kind of the thing. It's, there's a lot of different, think outside the box. It doesn't have to look like the stereotypical, out there walking for miles and miles with polywire and carrying this bundle of posts. And then I'm not dogging that, but that's not necessarily the only way, I guess what I'm saying.
Right. There's multiple ways to do this.
Yeah.
Pick something you're comfortable with and try it. Move your animals. That's the big thing. Get those animals moving.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So you started, I got to check my notes. I think in 2011, you got a couple head and was able to run them with your grandpa. And then your operation has grown since then.
Right.
Have you always been with one breed of cows? Do you go commercial? You registered? Where do you fall in that paradigm?
Well, I guess we are, and kind of always been in this kind of, I guess I call it a bunch of mutts. I would say that's not true, but I was going to say my grandpa just had a variety pack, and that we kind of still have that to this day. Primarily Angus and Simmental. We have some Charolais mixed in out there, a little bit of red pole, and a little bit of shorthorn in some of them. Just that everyone has a story where it came from and why and how it ended up here. So, and believe it or not, 2 of them are actually half Wagyu. So,
yes.
Story on that we won't get into. But anyway, so it's just everything. I will say at this point, because getting started, I wasn't focused on like the genetics as much as just simply building my herd numbers to get in with grandpa. And so as a more quantity versus quality. So at this point, I say we are kind of shifting our thoughts a little bit more towards more the genetic side of it. And I don't know that I'll shift breeds as much as just hone in on genetics and like get more. We've got some larger frame cows. Those need to go, back in the dairy days, they didn't mind a large frame cow, and so that's kind of shifting our thought process. Papple's been very open-minded throughout this process, and I'm thankful for that. But that's kind of one of those things where, a cow is a cow, and it's like, well, now we're kind of, let's look at efficiency. Let's get more of a moderate sized animal. So that is changing as we progress forward. So,
and for someone who's had cattle for a long time, especially on the dairy, with my dad's progression, we've got moderate sized cows now in his herd, but we were aiming for big cows because, when we dairy, the bigger the cow, usually the more milk she gave.
Right.
And really on that path. So we brought the cow size down in his herd, and in my herd, they're even smaller, which I don't want to put words in his mouth, but my assumption is he thinks they're probably a little too far small on that. So it takes time depending on how you were, what history you have, what knowledge you bring to it. This could be a little bit of a change.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're sourcing your animals, Adam, did you buy them at a sale barn? How did you get those initial animals in?
No, let's see. The first 2 that I bought, I got off my dad, I believe.
Nice.
Dad of my grandpa. And there's a couple of young heifer calves. There's of breeding age, but that was how I started. And then after that, I started with 2, and then I obviously had a 2 calf crop, and just gradually, if I had a steer, I'd trade either dad or grandpa for a heifer. Early on, I was looking more at building the herd. I wasn't selling the steers. I was just trading my steers for heifers. And I just slowly, mostly built up. I bought, whenever I started managing Sue's, if she had a nice heifer, then I would buy a heifer off of her, or, take it out of, I guess, but take it out of my calf check or my part of the calf.
Right. So you're trading it out.
Right. Yeah. So more or less trading out. But that was most of what I'm trying to think. I don't know that I actually bought any outside animals and brought them in. It was mostly just, genetics from either our herd or family herd or, somewhere right here close. I was just wheeling and dealing and just, trading and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Keeping And the great thing about doing that, you get animals already adapted to your all's area, and those epigenetics are right there in line. Whereas if you're going out buying animals, you don't know, especially through a cell barn, you don't know where they came from. You don't know kind of the way they've been handled or any of that.
Right.
And, it increases your excitement in life when you're buying those cell barn cows. We've done it a few times.
Yeah. Well, whenever in 2011, when I was already helping my grandpa, like I said, they was pretty well just free range cattle out there, and we had some adventures. We won't get into that, but I'm telling you, we had some adventures some of those early roundup days, and that was very much a turning point of life's too short to deal with this. So that was the other thing about keeping animals from local, and I knew the background of versus going to sale barn is I could also pick for docility and how calm they was and that kind of thing. So maybe put a little more emphasis on that early on than what I should have. But at the same time, I'm also not ashamed of where our herd is today in aspect of you can go out there and handle them versus head up, running to the other end or anything like that. So
I completely agree. And I guess there is a point you can put too much emphasis on that, but I also feel like not getting hurt, especially when you have a W-2 job. And
Right.
Dad and I talked about this a lot when I was working off the farm. And we selected for docility. We made sure we brought in bulls that was along that line because I couldn't afford to get hurt. My
Right.
W-2 job's paying my bills.
Yeah.
And I don't like to ever say it was a hobby because I expect the farm, I expect the cows to pay for themselves, but that's not the way I paid my bills.
Right.
So we worked and got them calmed down. But yeah, there was a time there that getting hurt was a real possibility. And you could still get hurt, but it's really minimized when you get those calmer animals.
And also, I find with the calmer animals, back to the efficiency. If you're not having to, chase them down or play rodeo every time you want to do something, I mean, I kid you not, we go out there to the gator. Those cows, I mean, they're ready to move. Usually 2 days prior to when we're ready for them to move.
Yes.
Or at least the day prior. They're like, all right, let's go. So all you got to do is open the gate. I mean, they'll follow that gator anywhere. So I was going to say that's worth a lot.
Oh, I completely agree. Just going on that tangent just a little bit. My uncle and grandpa have cattle, and their cattle are a little bit more nervous than ours. If we have a sick animal or something that needs attention, it does not bother me to bring the cows into the handling system. It's pretty easy to get them there. I can do it. I don't think the cows get worked up too much.
Mm-hmm.
It's not too bad. For their operation, those cows just get nervous in their handling facility, so they use a dart gun to doctor stuff.
Yeah.
Which I see people promote the dart gun. That's a great way to not stress your animals too much. But then I think my animals are pretty calm. They don't get stressed too much coming to the working facility. And I want to issue a caveat there. My cattle right now are more nervous. I say my dad's cattle are more nervous this year than they've been for years. And I'm trying to figure out what's happened and what I did wrong.
Yeah. Well, you brought up a point there, and we do a little bit of both. We utilize a dart gun some, but not for the sake of not being able to bring cattle in, because we can bring our cattle into the barn, into the working facility, no problem. However, on between the two farms, which are all connected, it's 120 acres, and at the farthest point in the back pasture, we are literally a half a mile from any facility, any catch.
Oh yeah.
So if they're back there and I have, a sick animal or whatever, obviously for the time's sake, if it's something that I can treat with a dart gun, then we will utilize a dart gun. But if they're anywhere up close to the barn, we'll bring them in and utilize the catch pen and the facilities there.
Yeah, and that's true. You got an animal not feeling well. Walking them a half mile is going to take a lot of time.
Right.
Now, with your herd and genetics, what kind of bulls are you using?
The last several years, we've been semi-Angus. They're 3/4 Angus, quarter Simmental. That gives us basically 100% black calf crop. And
Oh yes.
I say that is because we don't direct market any of our animals, at least not very few. Almost everything. We're cow-calf operation, so we wean them. We give them, the first initial vaccinations, called preconditioning in the commercial world, I guess, if you want to use their terminology. And then we deal with a feed yard that's, we actually have a couple of them in the area, but one that has dealt with us quite a bit in the last 7 years or so. And we sell directly to him. And so we'll sell basically our entire calf crop to him. And then he, commercially finishes them out the rest of the way. So that's where we're kind of in. I mean, we obviously do the rotational grazing, but I'd say we have to still answer to what the market wants because we're selling on a commercial level. So we like the black bulls, we like the black calves. If we sell direct to consumer, could probably venture into other breeds. I was going to say, might get into that more someday down the road. But for now, that's obviously still have to contend with what the market wants.
Yeah. And those black calves bring a premium.
Yeah.
And then you've got a nice little agreement there where you're not having to send them wholesale through a sell ring. You can send them to a feedlot, to someone you work with and have a relationship with.
Yes. We've been very blessed to be able to work with him the last several years, and that's been good.
Oh, yeah. I think that'd be really a beneficial thing. Now, with sending them to a feedlot, is that like your dad, your grandpa, yourself, your brother-in-law all together, or are you more on your own with that?
When that guy comes up, I say he buys them per group, but lots of times they do all go together. And a lot of times we'll try to coordinate for the sake of transportation and trailering and whatever like that. If say I've got a half a load and Dad's got a half a load ready or something like that, then we'll try to coordinate, and try to put them on load together, stuff like that. So, but yeah, that's, we, a little bit of partnering there and a little bit of keeping it separate as well, if that makes sense. So
it does. Years ago, probably 20 years ago now, we had mainly limousine. My grandparents had limousine. A couple neighbors had limousine. A couple, I guess just one. And the three of us went together to make loads to go to the feedlot.
Yeah.
That worked really well. We usually got a little bit of a slight premium over the sale barn. Not too much, but a little bit, and then you didn't pay all that commission through the sale barn.
Right. Yep. Definitely. Because that's what I say. It's definitely, if you have the market like that, it's definitely the way to go.
Right. I completely agree. And you mentioned there, you're not going direct to consumer. And to be honest, direct to consumer is something I think about, but not something I really want to do. It may depend partly on the day you talk to me. I'm like, oh, I'm going to go do this. But when I really stop and think about it, that's not, I love, and this is probably a lot of grazers, I love managing my livestock. The direct consumer part is the part that I'm like, I just need to find someone and partner with them, and they can do all that, and I'll focus on the animals.
Yep. That would be the perfect world right there.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of opportunity. We just talked to Rachel on the podcast, and I believe she's putting up a store farm and going to have some products from her neighbors in there.
Yeah.
Which is a really great way for something she excels at. Well, her neighbors have that benefit of her and that outlet to her consumers. It can be very win-win if you can find those relationships.
Oh, yeah. And some of it's just where you're located at too.
It is.
How big a market you have for it.
I looked up for my other business, I was doing some research on how many people live within 30 minutes of me. And I actually found a website. I ought to put it in the show notes, but I'd have to look it up. That you can put an address on there and say 30 minutes of drive time from my address, which was, I'm a little embarrassed by how long I spent there, but 30 minutes, there's 44,000 people within 30 minutes of me.
Wow.
That's not a great lot. But when you go an hour, then you start getting into, I think it's like 300,000 within an hour. But that first 30 minutes, I'm pretty rural.
Right.
In my opinion. So that makes that direct to consumer a little bit tougher depending on where you are. And if you're willing, I'm not willing to drive to Tulsa and do farmers market. It's not something I desire to do. Now I do like to visit farmer markets.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and back to, for us, say back to, the working our jobs. So there, it's we've always talked about someday, if the opportunity allows, to where we end up, with one of us being on the farm, that we may, switch over and do a little more direct to consumer. But as long as we're both, have our jobs, both employed, then we're going to stick with the commercial sales.
Oh, yes. I think that's a wonderful point to bring up when you've got your W-2 job. You don't have the free space to really do that. And I say that. There's people out there that can get it done if they have a passion for it. Greg Judy talks about in his book, and different times he speaks, when he's putting up those first fences, he's working off the farm. He was doing it at night so he could get it done. So if that's a passion and where you want to go, you can figure it out. But some of us not quite there, and W-2 does factor into that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
When we look towards the future, Adam, where do you see your operation going?
That's a good question, because I can see different things. Probably just in the near future. One, like I said, kind of working on genetics a little bit more, kind of, refining some of that, improving that aspect of it. As I mentioned, my buddy Lee down there, he's really been after me to get in some warm season grasses. Emily's in the soil and water department, and they're both after me. You ought to get a program going. Get started with some warm season grasses. So that's probably, I don't know how soon, but that's probably in our future. Obviously, there's always improvements within the whole system. Taking on Sue's, as far as renting that, which that's kind of going to be more my brother-in-law James's baby. And he's going to do stalker calves, grass calves.
Yes.
By, weanlings and background them up to a certain weight. So, but I'm sure I'll be helping him with that. So that's going to take a little attention, I'm sure. And so kind of looking forward to that. I'm interested to see how the, up there we installed 2 tire waters.
Oh, yes.
The heavy duty tire waters. And we done a siphon system out of the ponds. So we got ponds up there, and NRCS helped us design. We didn't want to dig through the dam and mess up, have to drain our ponds. So 2 of them are actually siphon systems to draw water out of the pond up over the dam to these. And it's a, once again, kind of a summer, where they're located, be a summer pasture thing. And we haven't got to use them yet, because like I said, that just got put in this summer. So that's I guess an up and coming. I'm really eager to see how well that works. NRCS says that they work good, and obviously they give us the designs for that. So I would say that they will, but I'm really curious on that one. So.
Oh, yes, that's very interesting. The design on it, of course, I have designs popping up in my head how I figure it's done, but it'll be interesting to see how that works. And I would assume you'd have to go a fairly large diameter on pipe to get enough flow.
We got a 2-inch. Yep, we got a
2-inch
pipe, and goes down. And our tire tanks, based on measurements, we guess them to be somewhere between 400 and 500 gallon.
Oh, yeah. So you got quite a bit of volume there to really.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to fill up as quickly.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, very good. Well, Adam, it is time for our famous 4 questions. Same 4 questions we ask of all of our guests. Our first question: what is your favorite grazing grass related book or resource?
Well, I'll say I'm not really a book reader, so I don't have any books to recommend. They'll have to do their own homework on finding on there. I say they can ask you, Cal. I know you're into readings.
I am, yes.
So, but I say my biggest thing, I say, one, I guess, listen to podcasts. I mean, such as this one. I say I do a fair amount of that anymore, and a lot of my information that I got was either from like field days or word of mouth. Obviously, I had again unfair advantage of my brother-in-law, being kind of a guru about it and being so interested in it. So he was spoon feeding me all this stuff, trying to get me talked into it. So that was a big source for me. But then, I mean, the field days, I'm a visual learner. I'm a hands-on type of guy. So going to field days, seeing what other people do. Another big thing for me was down here in Southern Indiana, we have a short called SciPac, but it's the Purdue Agricultural Research Farm.
Oh, yeah.
I said that abbreviation wrong, but anyway, if you look up SciPac on Google, I say it's Purdue's research farm down here in Du Bois County in Southern Indiana. And Jason Towers, the manager, he's a great guy. He always welcomes people on the farm, wealth of information, and that's their whole everything is. They try stuff, and see where they have a beef herd, they have a sheep herd, a flock. But anyway, they do all this whatever, and they have all this data, and they have all this information, and they bring in new toys like portable shades and stuff like that to try, and they can tell you what works and what doesn't work, and demonstrations, and they have field days periodically, and that's been another big source for me. So,
oh yeah, seeing those other people doing what they're doing, explain what they're doing, and getting to see it firsthand really can make a difference.
Oh yeah.
Our second question, what's your favorite tool for the farm?
That's a toss-up. I say I'm kind of torn. I say and I probably mentioned to you beforehand, I say I'm a machinery guy. So I just say I like our machines. The tractor we have a couple of 95 horse Kubota front wheel assist tractors, and they are so versatile. Like everything from making hay to handling hay to the manure hauling to the baling, rolling. I said they can do just about everything. And so if I had to pick one or the other, it'd probably be that. But I don't know. It's a kind of a neck and neck with our John Deere Gator, I'd say, because we're out there with that thing all the time. We was very fortunate to find a good deal on one it's a diesel, so it's handy to have on the farm. It's got a enclosed cab with a heater. February we're calving. This past year I used it as a calf warming, throw it in the floorboard and warm the calves up if need be. I'm not sitting out there freezing. I'm not sure what I've done before. I'm very spoiled obviously anymore, but I froze out there, I guess. I was young and stupid before, but anyway, so
yeah, right.
The Gator's always on the move. It's always got our gear with us, fencing gear, doctoring gear, that kind of thing. So that's kind of neck and neck for me on that. I'm not sure which would be my favorite. So.
Yeah, and both of those are excellent tools for the farm. One thing I caution about a tractor, I hear so many people, they buy just a few acres, they get a few cows, and what's their next purchase? They buy a tractor. You can do a lot without a tractor.
You can.
But when you do get to that point that you need a tractor or you have access to a tractor can be very handy.
Yes, and that's once again, that's all within scale. If you got 5 cows or whatever, and you're getting into grazing,
right,
then I'm not going to encourage you to go buy a tractor, I'd say. But obviously we're a little bit larger than that, and already had some tractors around. But then, like I said, that's right, just those particular size for us. That's in my mind, a mid-sized tractor, and very versatile, very able to do a lot of different chores. So,
well, coming from more ranch area, not very much farming, that's a big tractor to me. So we've got 45 horse. We've got a couple of 45 horse tractors, somewhere right in there. And then we've got a little bit bigger. I'd say it's probably a 70 horse tractor that's actually not running. We need to work on it. But yeah, that's a little bit bigger than what we normally see in our area.
I get you. No, there's there's quite a bit of row crop, including my employer who's got some 300 horse tractors, and that's, you start comparing to that. I say the 95 is I'd almost have to call it a small tractor, but not really, I know, but as I say, you start stacking it up against some of these row crop guys, I say
I'm sure.
So,
yeah, well, that's a large tractor for down here. Our third question, what would you tell someone just getting started?
I would say one thing would be, don't be afraid to partner with somebody. Kind of like, I partner, obviously most of my partnerships was with, family or the one landlord was a neighbor, but kind of like I kind of mentioned earlier, partnered with my Aunt Sue. Like, she didn't want to give up farming. She didn't want to, totally give up whatever. And yes, it has its struggles working with someone, but that is, if you're young and you don't have a lot of money and, you're looking to get into it, if you can make a deal and make a written deal, I'm not saying you have to do just a handshake, make a
Right.
written agreement of some kind, that's fair for both parties, and, spell it out. I think that's a really good place to get started. I think people don't look at the older generation as, being open-minded, and you have to find the right person, but there's a lot of potential there. I see a lot of older people, guys and women alike, that, have a herd of cows, but they're getting to the age where they can't do it, or, maybe, just don't quite want to give it up, but they got to have some help. And young people could partner with that. And that would be a good opportunity to get started. And maybe it work out for you, maybe not, but don't rule that out. I guess what I'm saying. I feel like a lot of people just rule that out. No, I got to go out here and I got to buy this myself. And I want to start from the ground up. I want it to be all 100% mine. And, good things come to those who are patient. And sometimes you got to walk before you run. And so that's kind of my taking is, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for all the opportunities and all the people that helped me get where I'm at. And hopefully I've mentioned enough of them here to give them due justice. But I was going to say, there's a lot of people that have helped me get to where I'm at.
Yeah, we need you to mention all these people so you can tell them, hey, I mentioned you on the podcast, and they go and download, listen.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, a little selfish promotion.
There we go. Yeah, we're gonna spread this podcast one way or another.
Right, exactly. Adam, that's excellent advice. One thing I hear in the real estate circles quite a bit is people wanting to go at it on their own, but the podcast there talk about partnering with someone, because you don't have to have all the answers or all the money, especially when you're young. I mean, yeah. I'm still broke and I'm older, but young people don't have a lot of extra money, but maybe they have some labor that they're willing to put into a partnership or to help get that started. I almost spilt my coffee. Maybe they have some labor they could put into a partnership or something along that line. And one thing the real estate podcasts are really fond of saying, if you don't do anything, 0% of zero is nothing.
Yeah.
100% of nothing is still zero. But if you're able to bring a partner in, 50% of a partnership can be much greater than 100% of nothing.
Oh yeah. And that's what, there's everybody's situation different. So I'm not going to tell you what to do or not to do, but
right.
That's definitely don't take that option off the table.
Yeah. That context is so important. Yeah. We already asked our third question. Let's go to our fourth question today. And this one may be a tough one for you. Where can others find out more about you?
So yeah, I'm a little hard. I'm not on social media much. I do have a Facebook page. However, I'm very inactive on that. After talking to you here, I was going to say, I need to go out and take a video of my little water skid or some pictures to upload some of that, because I'm sure everybody's, going to be questioning that. So I will try the next few days here. I'll try to put a little of that on my Facebook page just so everybody can see that. But just my name, Adam Daugherty, on Facebook. Other than that, I was going to say, I'm not very accessible, but if you want to reach out, I do a lot of talking on the phone, because I wear a hands-free headset most of the time. So you can drop me a Facebook message, and if you're willing to take that step, I'm more than happy to talk to you. So, but yeah, I'll try to get back to you on something like that. But other than that, yeah, I'm not very active on the media. I'm out here working instead of on social media. So
right, exactly, yeah. Excellent, Adam. Do you have a question for me before we wrap up?
I do. I'm kind of curious, and you can be honest, but you don't have to, elaborate. All the graziers that you have interviewed and all this, and I know you have, livestock of your own. Do you implement any of those ideas on your own operation? Or are you just kind of mediator on this podcast and just kind of watch everything go by?
I feel like a good educator, and I spent over 2 decades in education as a facilitator, and I strive to be a facilitator. But every one of these conversations, I take something away. If it's the minor end or the low end is just my enthusiasm and renewal and motivation to get out there and do more. But on the upper end, it affects my practice and what I'm doing. I've read about ciphering or a siphon water trough. I'm sure I said that wrong. But you bringing that up, I'm going to look into that a little bit more because we have a spot or two that would be nice. We still water our natural water sources, but we're limiting their access there, so I don't feel like it's as terrible. But I would love to move them out of that. And that kind of water system might be an easy way to get it done. Now, we have water line put in from one of our bigger ponds, and we're putting some water points in. But these things, if we go back to the really ultra high density grazers, and Jaime Elizondo, he talks about resting a third of your land. So that's something I tried to do this year, was resting more of my land. And we end up getting a lot of water and belling, more hay than planned. So I didn't end up resting all of it as long as I did. But that's something, those insurance pastures. I forget even who said that on my podcast, but that's something I try and do. I try and take some areas out of production and let them rest as long as I can, just to give them a little bit of break. In fact, I've got, this is where I need more animals. I've got 80 acres that I've rested this whole season. So I'm pretty excited about that and see what that does. But each of these conversations, I may not be able to pinpoint exactly when you say, oh, you talked to so-and-so. What did I get from that? I'd have to think about it for a little bit. But I really pull something, and it has improved my practice. In fact, I wrote something down the other day, and the person who's benefited the most from this podcast is me.
Yeah.
Because of my practice has improved so much because of this podcast.
Yeah. I could see that, because it's since listening to your podcast, and everybody's operation is different. So obviously, we can't all implement the same things, but you can take tidbits and, hey, I never thought about that, or just simply how a fence is, put up, or how a water system is done, or whatever. You can weave some of that stuff into your own operation.
Yeah, and I like to tell people I'm a little slower than other people. Sometimes someone can get told something once and they're like, oh, that's a great idea. I feel like for me, I need told it about 100 times and then something will click.
Yeah. I can agree with you. I'm a little dense sometimes myself. So ask my wife.
Yeah, we will not ask our wives. That will get the answer. This will take us a while to recover from. Adam, really appreciate you coming on and sharing today. And Adam, I just want to say thank you for this. Is very short notice, but you were able to jump on here and get this to happen. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank you for having me, Cal.
Two things that stood out to me from our conversation with Adam. First, you don't have to do this on your own. While he worked with family and it made it so he could get a start earlier, finding someone to partner with can give you that leg up. Secondly, you can do this while working that full-time W-2 job. That's not news to me. That's not news to many of you. But I do think we've not highlighted that lately on the podcast as much as we should. Many times when I'm looking for potential guests for the podcast, I'm searching on social media or doing a Google search. And typically those results I find are people that's doing this full time, and usually they're pushing into direct to consumer. But to be regenerative and use regenerative practices and be a grass farmer, a soil farmer, you do not have to go direct to consumer. And Adam showed us that day. Well, if that's you and you'd like to share your story, shoot me an email at cal@grazinggrass.com. And as always, thank you for listening to the Grazing Grass Podcast, where we help grass farmers learn from grass farmers. More grass, better soil, happier livestock. Keep on grazing, and we'll see you next week.